What is going on, Detroit Lions fans? As you can see, Steve here, Detroit Den 3-3, flying solo. Unfortunately, my poor little William is stuck at work today. He's stuck at work on a cold, wet, rainy little summer day. And he's stuck there. I got to fly solo. I got some plans this afternoon. So to get some content out to you guys, I'm rocking a solo, giving Will the day off. He deserves it. He works hard. So what I was doing just a little bit ago was I listened to head coach Dan Campbell's press conference for the Detroit Lions, and this guy's got me fired up. He's really just saying a lot of things that I love to hear. I'm going to be paraphrasing a lot of stuff that he said. He started out with, obviously, the big news of the week was Frank Ragnow, and he mentioned Frank, and he got a little emotional, and he was talking about, what a leader he's been in that clubhouse, in the locker room, just being just a pro, man. We already knew that from Frank. And he said something, and we kind of fall into this category too. All right. If we say something that maybe we shouldn't have even brought up, maybe this falls on us, but he said that it was disrespect for people to even bring up the Frank Ragnow contract. Now, we weren't the ones who brought it up, but we did talk about it. So that's why I say maybe we fell into that category as podcasters. But I will say this, I was battling for Frank. I was saying that Frank deserved all the money that he wanted. I know how important he was to the team. So Dan Campbell kind of said some stuff about Frank. Obviously, that's what's on everyone's mind this week. And people were asking him questions, and he was saying stuff about, episodes that we've done stuff on. So we're not going to dive deep into that with all the players who could play center, who's going to shuffle where. He addressed a lot of stuff, mentioned a lot of names that I don't want to dive too much into because we had already mentioned most of them. But I think as podcasters and YouTubers, we fall into that category of maybe we shouldn't have brought up the contract stuff. And again, we weren't the ones who brought it up, but because we mentioned it and we did an episode on it, we didn't mean to be, or I'm speaking for myself here, Will, and I apologize, but we didn't mean to be disrespectful about it. And again, I said that Frank deserved all the money in the world. So that was kind of the focal point of the beginning of the press conference for head coach Dan Campbell. Had to bring that up. Also, man, the next couple topics I have, these are the ones that excited me. Okay. Someone in the audience, one of the reporters, I don't know who it was, or I'd give him a shout out, was just kind of asking, hey, who's been kind of standing out to you guys at OTAs? He said, I know I ask you guys this every year, but I'm just wondering who's chugging along, who's looking good. And the names that Dan Campbell mentioned, there's 4 names that really stuck out to me. 2 of them, Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams. All right. And I like to hear that because on offense, those are our playmakers. Those are our electric guys that me and we'll talk about all the time. You touch a football, it could be an 80-yard touchdown. It could be an 89-yard touchdown. Like, you kind of hold your breath when they touch the football. And for Dan Campbell to come out and say that it's still just in spring, but I really like where those guys are. Me and Will were actually probably going to talk about an episode based on who's going to have to carry the load for the offense. And Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams were going to be the guys that I was going to mention. So we'll see if we do that later down the road. But Gibby, J-Mo, the 2 most electrifying players on this offense. All right, St. Brown, we know what he is, man. He's going to catch every single football that comes his way. And if he doesn't, if he drops a pass, he's going to hit the jugs after a game for 225 catches or whatever the number is. But I absolutely love hearing that J-Mo and Gibbs are having good springs. And even Dan kind of mentioned this, it's the pajama Olympics. There's no real contact. It's kind of hard to really get a gauge on guys and see where they are. But for it just being spring ball and OTAs, he said that those 2 and Andis Raikstraw and Sam Laporta, someone asked later on, so we had to come back to the same question. Andis Raikstraw and Sam Laporta also having really good springs. I expect Sam Laporta. All right. I know a lot of people kind of knock him because he had a down year last season where he still had like 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, which is still an incredible year for a tight end, especially on a Detroit Lions offense that's very, very loaded with playmakers and weapons. But Andis Raikstraw, and I got to give a shout out to Will. He's the one who's kind of been preaching this pretty much all off season, that Andis Raikstraw could be a massive difference maker on this team. And I'm chuckling because someone in the audience also asked, where do you see him fitting in? And Dan kind of went on to explain, we tried to throw him at some nickel reps last year, and it was just a bit much for him. And someone asked, do you think he has a role on this team? And Dan goes, that's up to him. That's really, really up to Andis Raikstraw and what happens going forward. Now, when he says that, I immediately think, Andis, just stay healthy first and foremost. We know you kind of had some boo-boos coming out of college, and that was our only concern with you being mocked to the Detroit Lions that season as a potential first-round pick. We got an absolute steal getting you in round 2 with Terry and Arnold in round 1. He couldn't stay healthy as a rookie. I saw a clip the other day, I think it was 2 days ago, where he was guarding Jamison Williams, fastest guy on the team, and Ennis was lockstep, foot for foot with him, like step for step, locking down Jamison Williams. And I say locking down, but JMO still made the catch in the clip that I saw. But that's a hard guy to keep up with, and that's someone that Dan Campbell was just mentioning who's having a good spring. So at the very least, when Dan Campbell says that's up to Ennis on what kind of role he's going to have, and he says, the best guy's going to play. If you're the best guy, you're not going to be on the sidelines. You're going to be on the field. And Will has mentioned this a bunch of times. Where's he going to play? He could play some outside corner. He could play some inside nickel. Maybe if something were to happen and we needed some safety stuff, Terry Arnold has played some safety when he was at Alabama, so we could shuffle him back to safety, put Ennis at corner. Like, he just makes our secondary very, very, very versatile, in my opinion. So I think that Andis Raikstraw, as a kid that we didn't really get to see fully as a rookie, is someone to have your eyes on with training camp coming up here in the next few weeks. And he's probably on my top 3 list for people that I'm going to be keeping an eye on for Detroit Lions, because I think Andis Raikstraw could have a massive, massive role on this team just because of how versatile he is. And with injuries happening in the NFL, you guys know the deal, what happened last season. It was ugly. So if that injury bug starts lingering around our defensive backs rooms and Andis Raikstraw is able to just kind of play some different positions and some different roles, I think that's going to be some massive, massive advantages for the Detroit Lions. Someone finally asked about Malcolm Rodriguez, and Dan Campbell said conservatively probably will not be ready till November. I don't know exactly where Rodriguez is with his rehab and what's going on, but I think Rodriguez is just a fan favorite for Detroit Lions fans. He's one of my favorites. Like, I absolutely love the way this guy plays football, man. When he was drafted, me and Will weren't podcasting at the time, but I remember Will telling me, like, hey, you need to do some homework on this kid because he will run through a brick wall. And he's done exactly that since being drafted by the Detroit Lions. One of my favorite Rodrigo moments was him absolutely hip tossing Jason Kelce as a rookie when we were playing the Philadelphia Eagles. We were actually at that game, and I got a first row look at that. He absolutely tossed Jason Kelce like he was doing judo on him. So Rodrigo probably not going to be healthy until November conservatively. I think when he uses the word conservatively, that's kind of like, that's the worst case scenario. So maybe it could be a little bit sooner than that. I'm trying not to read or dissect too much into Dan Campbell's words or what he said. If he says conservatively, I'm not exactly sure what his mindset is when he says something like that. But to me, that's like as late as possible, maybe November. But maybe if we get lucky, maybe if Rodrigo is a fast healer or he's doing really well in rehab, maybe that could be like mid-October, late October, or something a little bit earlier than November. So that's kind of what I took from when he said conservatively. But this last piece, this last topic was what really perked my ears up when he was just, Dan was just up at the podium talking. I don't think anyone even asked him this, but he goes, defensively, we're up to speed. We're chugging along with Kelvin Shepherd. And that was just kind of like, oh, okay. Hey, Dan, I like what you're saying now, Dan. You're speaking my kind of language, because the defense has been the talk of the Detroit Lions town for at least like the last 2 or 3 seasons. And if you can hear my daughter downstairs upset, I'm very apologize. She's having just the worst day ever. Only 7 weeks old. So she's absolutely just fighting through life and how rough it is. If you guys can hear her, I apologize. But when Dan Campbell was talking about the defense, and I just started thinking, like, it's good to just hear some good news. And I know Dan Campbell's not going to get up to the podium and say, yeah, the defense isn't up to par. The defense is kind of behind a little bit. I know he's never going to say stuff like that, but just that positive reinforcement gives me a little bit of hope. And he talked about a guy like Ahmed Hassanin saying, we had to kind of dial back some stuff for him. We couldn't really go full speed. Most of his reps were just walk through. And then he just kind of mentioned that how raw he is. And he didn't really dive into Ahmed Hassanin too much. And I know that these OTAs, it's basically the NFL combine with a helmet on. Like, you're not doing too much. It's just kind of the coaches teaching you some technique and going through some drills and getting into the playbook and getting used to some meetings and working out as a pro. I know it's not too much to dissect into, but it's at least some football news. It's at least something to talk about. So Ahmed Hassanin was mentioned. Tyleik Williams, our first-round draft pick, not really doing much practice today, still kind of nursing a boo-boo. I think he's still nursing that injury that he had from his Ohio State combine where he did a little something to his hamstring. So I think the coaches are just kind of taking it easy. There's really no need for him to be out there during OTAs, like I just said. OTAs are important to get some work in and start getting used to being an NFL pro. But if you're not actually working out on the field, this is not any time to panic if you're not out there. So Dan Campbell talking about the defense, man, it got me excited. I was going to go a whole other direction with today's episode, but trust me, this is what I wanted to talk about. Didn't even know Dan was going to do a press conference today until I got the alert on my phone, had to come up, watch it, do some dissecting, do some digging. I was going to go a whole other way, and I might do that tomorrow. If me and Will can't line up our schedules, my solo, you guys will see, I'll mention it. But Dan Campbell at the press conference, he only talked for about 13, 14 minutes. It wasn't overly long, but some of the things he talked about today, mainly who's sticking out in training camp, the guys I mentioned, defense being up to speed, the Frank Ragnow stuff. I had to get on here, give you guys an update. What I want you guys to do, hammer that subscribe button. Leave some comments. Let me know who you guys are keeping an eye on when training camp opens up here soon. Stick around, hit that like button. We'll be back later with another show.